This is my best RPG games tier list, ranked purely on my personal experience. Every game here is placed from masterpiece down to trash, based on how deep the systems felt, how strong the world and story were, and how memorable the overall journey turned out. Let's get straight into the list. Baldur's Gate 3 is easily a masterpiece for me. I spent over 100 hours in this world and I never felt like my time was wasted. The writing is on another level, the characters feel real, and the choices actually matter. I love how the game rarely tells me no. If I see something, I can usually interact with it in a smart way. The turn-based combat is deep and forces me to think every time, especially on higher difficulty. Even small side quests feel important, and the story keeps building in a powerful way until the end. Yes, there are a few bugs and performance issues, but they never took away from the overall experience for me. For CRPGs, this sets a new standard, and that is why I am placing Baldur's Gate 3 in the masterpiece tier. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt starts a bit slow for me, and at times the main story feels like I am just chasing information from one place to another. But once I begin exploring the world on my own, everything changes. The open world feels alive, and many of the side quests are deeper and more emotional than the main plot itself. I really like how my choices have real consequences, without any simple good or bad meter telling me what is right. The combat feels smooth and powerful, especially when I mix sword fighting with signs to control each battle. Even after spending so many hours in this world, I kept discovering meaningful stories and moments that stayed with me, and because of that, this easily sits in my masterpiece tier. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 impressed me with how serious and detailed its medieval world feels. The sword combat is skill-based and intense, and every fight forces me to pay attention. The city of Chornobyl stands out the most because it feels alive, busy, and full of meaningful quests. Many side quests feel like full episodes with strong writing and real consequences instead of simple tasks. The main story feels like a big war film with emotional moments and memorable characters, even if sometimes the open-world freedom clashes with scripted missions. There are a few technical issues and some design conflicts, but I still spent more than 100 hours in this world, and for me, this clearly belongs in the excellent tier. Persona 5 Royal took an already great RPG and made it even better for me. The turn-based combat feels more exciting thanks to changes like bullets refreshing after each fight and the new Showtime attacks, which adds style and big damage moments. I also like how the Velvet Room fusion system feels more rewarding but a bit risky at the same time. The new third semester adds an important story arc with a strong new character, and it fits naturally into the main journey. Even Mementos feels improved, with better rewards and less grinding. On top of that, the music, characters, and daily life systems are deeper and more polished than before. After more than 100 hours, it still felt fresh to me, and this absolutely deserves a place in my masterpiece tier. Elden Ring tested me in ways very few games have. I spent almost 90 hours exploring its massive world, and I was constantly surprised by what I found. There were moments of frustration when I lost a lot of runes, but the feeling of finally beating a tough boss made it worth it every time. I love how the game gives me total freedom. If one path feels impossible, I can leave, explore somewhere else, get stronger, and come back later. The open world rewards curiosity with real value, whether that is a new weapon, spell, or secret area. Combat feels deep and challenging, with tough enemies that force me to learn and adapt instead of just reacting fast. The Legacy dungeons still deliver that classic Souls design inside this huge map. For me, this stands at the absolute peak in my masterpiece tier. Cyberpunk 2077 impressed me with how much freedom it gives in both story and gameplay. Night City feels dense and detailed, and I enjoyed simply driving around and taking it all in. The main story is shorter than I expected, but the side missions are where the game really shines. Many of them feel important, and my choices often changed how events played out later. I like how I can build V in different ways, whether that is hacking, stealth, or going in with heavy weapons, and the perk system supports all of it without forcing me into one path. Combat is not the deepest I have played, but mixing guns, quick hacks, and cyberware abilities kept it interesting for me. The biggest issue is the number of bugs, which can break immersion at times. Even with those problems, the world, characters, and player choice make this strong enough to land in my excellent tier. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth takes everything I liked about Remake and expands it into a much bigger adventure. The open regions are beautiful and full of side content, and even though it follows familiar open-world ideas, I still enjoyed exploring each area and spending more time with these characters. Combat feels deeper with the new synergy abilities, and switching between party members in tough fights is both strategic and satisfying. That said, the story sometimes feels messy, especially near the ending where the timeline ideas become a bit confusing. Even with those flaws, the scale, combat depth, and character moments make this strong enough to earn a clear spot in my excellent tier. Dragon's Dogma 2 refuses to hold my hand, and I had to accept that very early. There are no constant map icons guiding me, fast travel is limited, and even healing comes with risk because my maximum health drops if I take too much damage. I like how it forces me to prepare before heading out, choosing the right pawns and thinking carefully about supplies. Combat feels weighty and satisfying, especially during large monster fights that can happen almost anywhere in the world. At the same time, some systems feel outdated, like the single save slot and vague quest directions, which can become frustrating. The story is decent, but the real highlight for me is the strong sense of adventure and the feeling that the world does not revolve around me. It can be stubborn and awkward, yet its unique design and rewarding combat secure it a firm spot in my great tier. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim completely took over my free time when I first played it. I would start with one quest, and somehow end up organizing my house in Whiterun, crafting gear, or wandering into a cave I did not plan to explore. The freedom it gives me still feels special, because I can ignore the main story and just live in the world. I love how skills improve by actually using them, which makes my character grow naturally based on how I play. Dragon fights are always exciting, and discovering new shouts gives exploration real purpose. The world feels alive, with factions, side stories, and random events that make every play session different. Yes, there are bugs and some combat can feel clunky, but the sense of immersion and endless adventure is hard to match, which is why this easily belongs in my masterpiece tier. Mass Effect 2 is one of those rare sequels that improves almost everything from the first game. From the start, the tone feels darker and more intense, and building a team for what is clearly a suicide mission kept me fully invested. I love how each squad member has a loyalty mission that adds real depth to their character, and the final mission is still one of the most powerful moments I have experienced in an RPG. The way decisions carry over from the first game makes the story feel personal, and it genuinely made me think about every choice. The soundtrack adds even more weight, especially during the final act. Planet scanning can slow the pace a bit, but it never ruined the experience for me. The storytelling, characters, and high stakes easily place this in my masterpiece tier. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chornobyl constantly tests my patience, but that is also part of its appeal. The zone feels harsh and unforgiving, with limited fast travel, scarce resources, and threats that can kill me in seconds. I really like how it forces me to prepare carefully before heading out, managing weight, ammo, radiation, and gear condition. The atmosphere is easily its strongest feature, with dynamic weather, dark nights, and eerie anomalies that make exploration tense and memorable. Gunplay feels solid when fights click, especially during intense shootouts where every bullet counts. At the same time, strange enemy behavior, performance drops, and frequent bugs break immersion more than they should. Even with those technical problems, the sense of danger and immersion keeps it engaging enough to secure a place in my great tier. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild completely changed how I see open-world games. From the moment I stepped into Hyrule, I felt true freedom, because I could climb almost anything, glide across huge distances, and explore in any direction without being forced down a single path. I love how the world runs on clear systems, where fire spreads naturally, metal attracts lightning, and weather can either help or ruin my plans. Combat feels simple at first, but learning how stamina, weapon durability, and archery all connect made every fight more strategic. The shrines and divine beasts constantly challenged me with clever puzzles that rewarded experimentation. Even after dozens of hours, I kept discovering new secrets and unexpected moments. The sense of adventure, smart design, and pure freedom make this an easy choice for my masterpiece tier. Pillars of Eternity drew me in with its deep writing and serious tone right from the start. Early story moments made it clear that this world is not afraid to take risks, and that gave real weight to every decision I made. Playing as a watcher and reading the souls of others adds a unique layer to quests, especially when choices rarely have simple right or wrong outcomes. There is a lot of reading, but I enjoy that level of detail because it makes the world feel dense and carefully crafted. Combat is challenging and highly tactical, and I constantly had to pause and plan or risk losing my entire party in seconds. Managing 6 characters can feel demanding over time, yet it also makes hard-fought victories more rewarding. The old-school presentation will not appeal to everyone, but the strong writing, meaningful choices, and strategic battles firmly place it in my excellent tier. Dragon Age Origins feels like a true classic RPG in the best way possible. From the start, choosing my race, class, and origin story made my playthrough feel personal, especially since the world reacts differently based on who I am. I love how the Grey Warden storyline builds slowly into a desperate fight against the Blight, while still giving me tough moral choices that can completely change outcomes. Managing my party relationships adds another layer, because my decisions can strengthen bonds, unlock abilities, or even push companions away. Combat rewards careful planning, especially when I pause and set up powerful spell combinations. Despite some dated visuals and minor combat issues, the depth, replay value, and strong storytelling easily secure this in my masterpiece tier. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is one of the most ambitious RPGs I've ever played. From the very first hour, the massive character creation options made me realize this was a game built for deep role-playing, and I spent a long time shaping the exact kind of hero I wanted. The story around the Worldwound and the demon invasion kept escalating in scale, and my mythic path choices made my journey feel personal and powerful. I really enjoy the depth of the companions, especially how their beliefs can clash with my decisions and even turn against me. Combat in real time with pause feels tactical and satisfying, though it demands attention and planning. The Crusade management systems can feel unnecessary and sometimes slow things down, and there are still technical rough edges. Even with those flaws, the sheer scope, meaningful choices, and build freedom make this an easy pick for my masterpiece tier. Disco Elysium completely changed how I think about role-playing in games. I wake up as a detective in the city of Revachol with no memory of who I am, staring at a murder case and a shattered identity. There's almost no traditional combat. Instead, everything happens through dialogue, skill checks, and the voices in my own head shaped by how I build my character. I can be kind, cruel, ideological, broken, or trying to rebuild myself, and the game reacts in meaningful ways. The writing is sharp, political, funny, and deeply human, and even small side characters feel important. Solving the case matters, but deciding who I become matters even more. Few games give this much freedom and depth at the same time, and for me, this easily stands at the very top in the masterpiece tier. Bloodborne throws me into a dark, twisted city where every step feels dangerous, and I love that intensity. The combat is fast and aggressive, forcing me to dodge at the right moment and strike back without hesitation. The transforming weapons make every fight feel fresh, and the bosses are some of the most terrifying and satisfying battles I've ever faced. I die a lot, but each death teaches me something, and when I finally win, it feels earned. The world is mysterious, with hidden lore and creepy details that slowly come together the more I explore. Even with some technical issues, the overall experience is unforgettable, and this easily sits in my masterpiece tier. Fallout 4 drops me into a massive post-nuclear world, where almost every building hides a story or some valuable loot, and that constant sense of discovery keeps me moving. The gunplay feels much better than past games, so I can rely on real-time shooting or still use VATS when I want that classic slow-motion style. I like how deep the crafting system is, because suddenly junk like duct tape and desk fans actually matter, and upgrading my weapons makes them feel personal. The companions, especially Nick Valentine, add heart to the journey, even if the main story is not the strongest part. Settlement building is interesting, but not essential for me. It's not perfect, but I had a great time exploring, so this comfortably lands in my good tier. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic puts me in the middle of a completely original Star Wars story set thousands of years before the movies, and it still feels perfectly authentic. I start as a simple soldier, slowly discover my connection to the Force, and choose whether I walk the light or dark path. The dialogue choices really matter, shaping my character and even changing how the story unfolds. Combat blends strategy and action, especially once I get my lightsaber and powerful Force abilities. The companions like HK-47 and Bastila are memorable and full of personality, and the plot twist still stands as one of the best in gaming. For me, this is Star Wars at its absolute peak, so it belongs in the masterpiece tier. Dark Souls begins in a bleak, dying world where almost everything can kill me in seconds, and that constant danger defines the entire experience. I die over and over, but each death teaches me something about enemy patterns, level layouts, or my own mistakes. The combat feels heavy and precise, so every dodge, shield raise, and sword swing truly matters. The interconnected map design is incredible, especially when I unlock a shortcut and realize how smartly everything connects back to a single bonfire. The bosses are brutal but fair, and beating them gives me a level of satisfaction that few games can deliver. It explains very little, yet that mystery makes exploring even more meaningful. And because of that unforgettable journey, this belongs in my masterpiece tier. Red Dead Redemption 2 takes me into a living, breathing world where every action feels meaningful, whether I am helping a stranger on the road or making a difficult choice during a robbery. Playing as Arthur Morgan, I slowly watch the Vanderlinde gang fall apart, and that emotional weight stays with me the entire journey. The open world is incredibly detailed, with random encounters, wildlife, changing towns, and small conversations that make everything feel real. Even when missions follow a set structure, the character writing and performances keep me invested. Arthur's personal struggle between loyalty and morality makes the story powerful and unforgettable. For its depth, atmosphere, and emotional impact, this easily sits in my masterpiece tier. Divinity Original Sin 2 gives me a level of freedom that very few RPGs even attempt. From the start, I can choose a unique origin character with deep personal goals, and those goals can clash in ways that completely change how quests play out. The world reacts to my decisions, and sometimes I lose entire quest lines because someone died or I made the wrong call, which makes every choice feel serious. Combat is fully turn-based and deeply tactical, where positioning, elements like fire and poison, and creative spell combos matter more than raw strength. I love how I can solve problems in unexpected ways, whether through dialogue, stealth, or clever use of abilities. Because of its freedom, writing, and strategic depth, this stands in my masterpiece tier. Planescape Torment feels less like a traditional RPG and more like an interactive novel where my choices and conversations carry real weight. I play as the Nameless One, an immortal man searching for his lost memories, and the story constantly challenges me with deep questions about identity, belief, and redemption. The writing is on another level, with long, thoughtful dialogue and unforgettable companions like Morte the Floating Skull. Combat is there, but most of my progress comes from talking, thinking, and making decisions that shape my alignment and relationships. The strange city of Sigil and its twisted multiverse setting make every moment feel unique and bold. For its writing, originality, and lasting impact, this belongs in my masterpiece tier. Black Myth Wukong delivers some of the most exciting action combat I've played in years, with fast, responsive fights and boss battles that constantly test my timing and strategy. The mix of focus attacks, spells, transformations, and spirit abilities gives me plenty of ways to approach each encounter, and learning a tough boss's patterns always feels rewarding. Visually, it's stunning, with detailed environments inspired by Journey to the West and impressive animations that make every swing of the staff feel powerful. Exploration is worthwhile, though I really wish it had a proper map because some areas are confusing to navigate. The biggest issue for me is the technical instability, with crashes and bugs that can interrupt key moments. Even with those problems, the combat and boss design are strong enough that I'm placing this in my great tier. Hades 2 takes everything I loved about the first game and expands it in smart ways without losing focus. Playing as Melino feels distinct, with a stronger emphasis on magic, battlefield control, and managing mana, and I like how her weapons and cast ability change the rhythm of combat. Having 2 full routes each night toward Kronos or up to Olympus adds a lot of variety, so runs rarely feel repetitive. The boons are better balanced this time, and I'm almost always excited to experiment with new synergies and elemental combinations. The characters and voice acting are excellent again, and the soundtrack stands out in a big way, especially during boss fights like Scylla and the Sirens. A few minor readability issues in handheld mode aside, this is a polished, content-rich roguelite that earns a place in my great tier. Monster Hunter World is the moment I truly understood why this series has such a loyal following. One hunt in the ancient forest says it all. After a long, exhausting fight with an Anjanath, it retreated into a Rathian's nest, only for the 2 monsters to clash in a brutal turf war. Watching the Rathian lift the Anjanath into the air and drop it from above, giving me the opening to finish the job, was unforgettable. That's what this game does best: dynamic, living ecosystems that create stories I want to share. Combat is deep, with 14 weapon types that completely change how I approach each hunt, and there's no traditional leveling system. Progress comes from crafting better gear from monster parts. Fights are long and demanding with no health bars, so I have to read behavior, watch for limps, and adapt. The environments are stunning, especially places like the Coral Highlands, and playing with friends makes every hunt even better. Tutorials can be unclear and the story is simple, but the thrill of the hunt carries it easily, earning it a spot in my excellent tier. Final Fantasy XVI's amazed me from start with its huge, dramatic story and fast, layered combat. I play as Clive, caught in a brutal war between realms fighting over mother crystals, and the world of Valisthea feels dark, political, and full of loss. The influence of Game of Thrones is clear alliances shift. No one feels safe, and major characters meet shocking ends. I really like how the active time lore system lets me pause and read about the history and factions, which helps with such a dense plot. Combat is where it stands out for me. Swapping between icon abilities, juggling enemies, building stagger, and unleashing limit break always feels powerful. Every new dominant adds fresh skills, so fights keep changing in smart ways. The massive icon battles are cinematic and unforgettable, easily some of the most impressive boss fights I've seen in an RPG. For me, this sits in the great tier. Deus Ex Human Revolution delivers one of the most satisfying RPG experiences I've had because it truly lets me shape how I play. As Adam Jensen, I move through a near future world divided over human augmentation, and the cyberpunk setting feels grounded, stylish, and thoughtful. I can approach missions through stealth, hacking, social manipulation, or direct combat, and the Praxis system forces me to choose what kind of augmented human I want to become. I love that side quests aren't filler. They have layers, consequences, and often connect back to the main conspiracy in meaningful ways. The gold-tinted art direction and soundtrack give it a distinct identity, even if some NPC models and boss fights show rough edges. The biggest flaw for me is how the boss encounters limit player choice, which clashes with the freedom offered elsewhere. Still, the depth of its world, the flexibility in gameplay, and the strong narrative focus make this an easy masterpiece tier entry in my ranking. Nioh 2 Complete Edition surprised me in the best way possible. I went in without playing the first game, and while the systems felt overwhelming at first, I quickly started to appreciate how carefully everything is introduced. Set in feudal Japan, it blends real historical figures with yokai mythology, and as someone who loves Japanese culture, I found the setting fascinating. Combat is deep and demanding, with Kai management, burst counters, guardian spirits, soul cores, and multiple weapon types all forcing me to think before I swing. Every enemy type requires a different approach, and boss fights feel like tough but fair skill checks. I did struggle at times with camera angles in tight spaces, and some side systems like clans and T-sets felt unclear, but the core combat and atmosphere more than make up for that. With the included DLC and high replay value, this easily earns an excellent tier spot for its depth, challenge, and rewarding combat mastery. Hogwarts Legacy gave me the fantasy of finally walking through Hogwarts, but once the excitement faded, I was left with a pretty average experience. The castle itself looks fantastic, and exploring the halls, secret passages, and surrounding countryside really captures the Wizarding World atmosphere. Combat is surprisingly solid too, with spell combos, dodges, counters, and shield-breaking mechanics that make fights engaging at first. But the problems start to stack up. The main story feels shallow and predictable, with plot holes that are hard to ignore, and despite a few likable classmates, most characters don't leave a lasting impact. Enemy variety is also a big issue. I spent far too much time fighting the same spiders, goblins, and dark wizards. On top of that, technical issues, frequent loading moments, and a frustratingly small inventory drag the experience down. There's a lot to do, but much of it feels repetitive rather than meaningful, so it lands in my mediocre tier. Path of Exile 2 already feels like a huge step forward for the series, even in early access. Within the first few hours, I could tell this was going to take over my free time with its deep build crafting and intense combat. The passive skill tree is massive, the class variety is meaningful, and every decision about gems, gear, and perks shapes how I play. Combat feels more active now, with dodge rolls and tighter movement that make boss fights demand real attention instead of mindless skill spam. The endgame Atlas system is surprisingly robust for an unfinished version, and I can easily see myself spending dozens more hours there. That said, loot drops feel far too stingy, and having to replay the same 3 acts twice just to reach endgame becomes repetitive. Technical hiccups and early access instability are also part of the experience right now. Even with those issues, the core systems are strong, the depth is impressive, and the foundation is excellent, which is why it earns its place in my excellent tier. Grim Dawn stands out as one of the strongest ARPGs I've played in years. From the first few fights, the combat feels weighty and satisfying, with every hit, spell, and explosion landing with real impact. The world is dark, detailed, and full of atmosphere, moving from ruined villages to creepy labs and wide-open wastelands, and I enjoyed exploring every corner of it. The dual mastery system gives me a lot of freedom to shape my build, and watching simple abilities grow into screen-clearing powers feels rewarding. With strong single-player focus and solid co-op support, this earns its place in my excellent tier for delivering consistently satisfying hack-and-slash action. Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord gives me some of the most intense medieval battles I've ever played. When I'm standing in the middle of a shield wall, ordering my troops while arrows rain down and cavalry charges, it feels chaotic and real. The combat system is deep but clear, with directional attacks, blocking, and smart positioning that really matter. Large-scale fights with hundreds of soldiers are the main highlight, and planning formations before a clash feels rewarding. But outside of combat, the world feels shallow. Kingdom politics, relationships, and progression often turn into repetitive grinding, and many systems lack depth. I spend a lot of time preparing for wars instead of doing meaningful strategy. Still, the battlefield moments are strong enough that I place it in my great tier. Starfield was one of my biggest disappointments in recent years. I went in expecting a deep space RPG, but what I got felt empty and frustrating. The constant fast travel kills any sense of real exploration, and most planets feel lifeless and repetitive. Cities look nice, but there are no proper maps, so I spend too much time running in circles. Inventory management is clunky and annoying, and basic features are locked behind skill points for no good reason. Combat feels average, enemies are forgettable, and space travel is mostly loading screens instead of real flying. After many hours, I realized I was pushing myself to keep playing instead of actually having fun. For me, this lands firmly in the trash tier. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the best samurai experiences I've played. From the first duel, I could feel how sharp and satisfying the sword combat is. Switching between stances to counter different enemy types keeps every fight tactical and intense, and the standoff mechanic makes walking straight into a camp feel bold and rewarding. I love that progression focuses on new techniques instead of just bigger numbers, so I actually feel more skilled as I learn. The island itself is stunning, with flowing grass, golden forests, and a guiding wind that replaces traditional waypoints in a smart way. Stealth and enemy AI can feel basic at times, but the strong story, memorable characters, and excellent combat easily carry the experience. For me, this earns a clear spot in the excellent tier. NieR Automata is one of the most unique and unforgettable RPGs I've ever played. It constantly shifts between hack and slash, shoot 'em up, side-scroller, and even text adventure, yet it all feels connected. The combat is fast, smooth, and stylish, with fluid combos and no stamina limits holding me back. I love how I can swap weapons instantly and customize my build with plug-in chips to change my playstyle. The world is haunting and beautiful, with ruined cities covered in nature and a soundtrack that stays in my head long after I stop playing. The story dives into deep themes about identity and purpose, and even when it gets strange, it never feels boring. This easily stands as a masterpiece tier experience for me. Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader lets me step into the role of a powerful noble instead of some random adventurer, and that power fantasy feels great in this brutal universe. The tactical combat is deep and demanding, with tons of abilities and positioning to think about, and I really enjoy building combos that let my squad wipe out entire enemy groups in a single round. The writing is the real highlight for me, with strong companions, meaningful choices, and quests that never feel like filler. Space battles and colony management add extra layers that make me feel like a true ruler of a sector. The system is complex and sometimes overwhelming, and I ran into more bugs than I would like, but the scale and ambition kept me invested for the long haul. For me, this commands a strong place in the great tier. Dying Light 2 Stay Human gives me one of the best parkour systems I've ever used in an open-world game. Running across rooftops, wall running between skyscrapers, and escaping hordes at night feels smooth and exciting every time. The day and night cycle adds tension, especially with the infection timer forcing me to think carefully about where I go. Combat is fun too, with dropkicks, parries, and brutal melee weapons that make clearing out zombies satisfying. The open world is big and packed with activities, and co-op makes it even better with friends. But the story doesn't grab me. The main character feels bland, and I ran into more bugs than I expected. Even with those issues, the movement and exploration carry it into the good tier for me. So this was my personal ranking of the best RPGs I've played, based purely on my own experience and what stayed memorable long after finishing. Thanks for watching. If your list looks different, that's the beauty of RPGs, because every journey hits players in its own way.